My F28 husband Ron, M34 is going through a huge issue and I would like to know whether what I am about to do is the right thing. For context, I met my husband 4 years ago. I still remember the day I met him like it was yesterday. I would always go to the same coffee shop and I guess he must have noticed me because one morning he came up to me and asked for my number. Ron is a really good looking person and he looked like he worked in finance, so I didn't hesitate much before giving him my number. He called me, we talked and decided to go out for a date. Ron was very upfront with me about his family's wealth right from the beginning. He told me that his dad worked really hard to become one of the top real agents so he could give their family a very luxurious life. He asked me about my family and I told him how I come from a lower income family but that I had worked hard to become an accountant. I had a good income and was self-sufficient, which was a dream come true for someone with my background. At first, everything seemed perfect between Ron and I. He would take me out to fancy dinners, shower me with expensive gifts, and talk endlessly about his family's wealth. He lived in a sprawling mansion, drove luxury cars, and wore designer clothes without a second thought. Coming from humble beginnings myself, I have to admit that I was mesmerized by his lifestyle and also felt a bit self-conscious. I would tell him that he was free to find someone more from his status, but despite our different backgrounds, Ron and I connected on a deeper level. I had a stable job that I was proud of, and he admired my determination and work ethic. When I met Ron's family for the first time, I couldn't help but notice the air of arrogance that surrounded them. Their mansion was like something out of a magazine, filled with expensive art and lavish decor. However, what struck me the most was how cold and distant they seemed towards me from our very first meeting. His mother refused to shake my hand and ignored me blatantly. It was as if she had immediately assumed I was only interested in Ron for their money, and she made this very clear through her demeanor and probing questions about my background. His parents wanted to know everything about my upbringing, education, and career, almost as if they were trying to gauge whether I was worthy of being with Ron. His older sister kept asking if I really just happened to meet Ron in that coffee shop or if it was just an elaborate plan I had to run into him. No matter how many times, Ron and I clarified that it was in fact he who had asked me out, and I had no idea about who he was. She didn't believe us telling me how everyone knows who they are. To be honest, I genuinely had not heard about them or seen them since I didn't grow up in such a wealthy neighborhood. Regardless of their insults and little jabs, I kept my mouth shut. At the end of the meeting, his dad did admit that I seemed like a hardworking woman, but he had always dreamed of watching his son get married to someone wealthier than him. This really offended me since I had never ever asked Ron to foot my lifestyle, and it was not my fault where I came from because at the end of the day, all the challenges I faced made me this stone, independent person, and I was not going to be ashamed about it. After this meeting, I told Ron that I was done meeting his parents and that he would be going to meet his family all on his own the next time because I did not want to go through so much scrutiny. He did try to protest, but I stayed firm in my decision and told him how humiliating it was. I also pointed out to him that my parents never treated him this way, so his parents had no right to be so cold and unwelcoming towards me. In the end, he agreed, and since then he has always gone to meet his family all on his own. However, despite what his family thought, our relationship continued to blossom, and soon we were talking about moving in together. I have to add that this was completely Ron's idea. You see, my lease renewal was coming up and I was looking to find a bigger place to move into for me and my dog when Ron told me that it would be a better idea for us to move in with him. We had been dating for 10 months by this time, so I was a bit hesitant. However, he tried to reason with me and told me how he could see himself spending the rest of his life with me, and moving in was the next logical step in our relationship. I took a few days to think, but in the end, I agreed. His house, which had been bought by his father, was really grand, but it always felt a bit too cold to me. You know, like how you step into an interior design showroom, where everything was carefully curated but lacked the warmth of a lived-in home. I turned his cold, lifeless house into a home. We had agreed on splitting bills and I didn't mind since I liked paying for my own things and I was anyway not having to pay any rent here. I think this is when I started noticing his life more closely now that we were living together. Up until then, I was always dazzled by his charms and the luxurious lifestyle he projected. One of the first things that struck me was the emptiness of his daily routine. Although he worked in finance, he seldom went to his office except for just one day of the week. He told me how his boss was his dad's friend, so he didn't have to go to the office every day, which I guess made sense. However, instead of working properly from 9 to 5, he would easily get tired and irritated and go out shopping. I would be at the office when he would send me multiple pictures of him wearing different luxury brand shoes, asking me which one I liked the best. This would happen at least thrice a week, but it was his money, so I didn't say anything. Next, every time he would buy a shoe, he would click and post multiple pictures of what he bought and constantly check on his phone to see if his friends or followers replied to his story. Ron had become a bit of an influencer since he always posted luxury stuff, so I guess that's why he was always into his phone, chasing after validation and approval. His social media friends would sometimes invite him to parties, but he would never take me with him and give me excuses like how he is not allowed to bring A+1 and how he just wants to make new friends, all on his mind. Even then, I kept my mouth shut even though it irked me a bit. Next, he bought a luxury sports car. I don't even know how someone can pay so much money for just a four-wheeler. While all of this was happening, I noticed that he had zero interest in paying any of his bills. Even though we had agreed on splitting our bills, he would always end up telling me to pay everything, and this would include his phone and cable bills, which I didn't even use. If I ever brought up that subject, he would tell me how we are partners and since he is letting me stay for free I should help out more. Looking back, I don't think my issue was paying his bills, but it was the gut instinct I had that something about him just felt wrong. If he was wealthy enough to buy luxury shoes, clothes, and cars, then why does he need help in paying bills? Obviously, I was grateful that I could stay at his place rent-free, but I didn't mind paying rent and living on my own if that meant that I would only pay my bills. Unlike him, I had a fixed budget and I wanted to save as much money as I could so I could one day start a family. I felt like he needed to do the same because if that was not our goal, then I didn't want to be with him. I decided to have a serious conversation where I told him all of this very frankly, and I gave him the option to break up with me if he and I were not on the same page. However, he assured me that he very much wanted to start a family with me and that I was a dependable woman. He told me that he was going to stop spending too much money. I thought everything would be fine after this. However, one day while cleaning his garage on a weekend when he was out golfing, I discovered that Ron had been living a facade in front of the whole world, including me. It turns out that most of what he flaunted was financed through debt and loans. His fancy car and his designer wardrobe were bought on credit. He had recent credit bills due to repay which he had absconded. I was shaken when I went through the bills which he had apparently hidden inside a shoebox. This meant that he had knowingly kept this hidden from me. I was furious. I waited for him to get back from golfing with his friends. When he did come back, he saw me sitting with all of his bills right in front of the table and he freaked out. He started yelling at me about why I went through the bills, and I told him how I knew everything and he could not hide from me anymore. Ron tried to backtrack, telling me how these were just a few bills and he was working on repaying them. I asked him why he had not just repaid them already since he was bringing in income every month from his job. This is when Rob confessed to me that he had been out of a job for the last 4 months. I was shocked by this revelation since he had been going into the office once a week as usual for the last 4 months, and the rest of the days we would text while I was at the office and he was supposedly working from home. I asked him how did this happen and why he never told me about it. Ron opened up about how his boss was an asshole and had gone back on his words and had been pushing for Ron to go to the office every day since the company was taking on more clients and Ron needed to have more face-to-face meetings. However, Ron felt it was disrespectful and he and the boss had a disagreement which resulted in his boss sacking him. Ron went on to tell me how it was not a big deal and that he would get a job in a jiffy when he would start to apply. My eyes widened in shock as I asked him what the hell he had been doing for the past 4 months if he had yet to apply for a job. Ron replied that he was taking a break for his mental health and that I should not blame him for any of this. I told him that even if he had lost his job, it didn't make sense as to why he was not able to pay bills since he did apparently come from a wealthy family. Ron told me how he did ask his parents for help but they had refused to help him. He went off about how his parents clearly favored his older sister more and how unfair this was. I felt like my entire relationship with me had been a lie. The illusion he had portrayed of himself was starting to come down. Clearly, he was not wealthy and that is why he depended on me to pay his bills while his unemployed ass could continue to buy luxury items and post about them on social media. I told him very firmly that I loved him but that this was not something I signed up for. I told him that I knew exactly how it felt to be broke and I had worked really hard to come out of it, so I was not going to let anyone drag me down to that place ever again. I informed him that if he didn't agree to change his ways right that second and show me through actions, I would be out of his house with my things that very evening. I guess seeing me this pissed really went through to Ron. He immediately apologized to me and sat down to discuss ways to deal with his bills. I told him that he needed to sell his car, pay back all his credit card bills, and stop buying any luxurious items for a while. Ben tried to refuse, telling me how people were going to judge him and how his friends were going to make fun of him. I told him that I honestly didn't care about any of that because he had mounting debts that needed to be resolved first. He tried to ask me if I could help him pay off some of the loan, but I refused and let him know that this was his responsibility and I would be paying off our monthly bills and taking care of any daily expenses. I let him know that until he took proactive measures to lessen his debt, I would not feel comfortable discussing a future with him. Begrudgingly, he agreed. Over the following months, Ben took proactive steps to address his debts. We put his car up for sale, and since it was a sports car, we got lucky because we got enough from the sale to pay back his loan and keep a little extra to pay back his other bills. Next, he cut back on unnecessary expenses and focused on repaying his credit card bills. As you can imagine, it was a challenging time for him since he is not used to cutting back on anything. There were moments of frustration and doubt, but I would encourage him to work hard to regain control of his finances. Eventually, Ben managed to clear a significant portion of his debt and I felt proud of the fact that he was trying. We did discuss him getting a job, but this is when Ben opened up to me about his plan to start his own business. He told me that he had an entrepreneurial spirit and wanted to explore that. I was vehemently against this as I am far more risk-averse than Ron. I knew he could be very fickle-minded at times and I didn't know for sure if he had the determination to concentrate on building his business. However, he had worked hard to pay off his debt, so I admittedly didn't fight much. During this time, Ron proposed to me, which took me by surprise. He told me how he had listened to all my demands and had paid off his debt, so now we could concentrate on starting a family together. I told him yes because at the end of the day I did love him and all I wanted was for him to keep working hard just like I did so we could both build a life together. He did inform me that his parents were unaware that he would be proposing, so he was a bit nervous to tell them. When he called to inform his parents, they told him that even though they were happy for him and would support him, they really did not expect that he would end up with someone like me. On the other hand, my parents were happy for me. We had a small wedding because I did not want to spend too much money and mess up our credits after Ron had just come out of debt. My parents graciously stepped in to help with the expenses for our wedding and I took out money from my savings also to pay for our wedding. Ron's contributions, on the other hand, were minimal, despite his family's supposed wealth. When our guests marveled at the elegance of the event, some even assumed that Ron and his family had probably footed the bill. Throughout all this, Ron remained silent, never correcting their assumptions or acknowledging the truth, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. It was disheartening to see him bask in the false praise, especially knowing that he had been unemployed for months and hadn't contributed financially as much as one would expect. His parents also shamelessly never corrected anyone, and maybe it was because they felt guilty after that, but they decided to foot our honeymoon. This was unexpected of them, but we accepted since otherwise we may not have even gone for a honeymoon. After our wedding and honeymoon, Ron worked on starting his own social media agency just like he had decided, where he would be working with brands and hiring influencers. This is no doubt a very lucrative business, but there are hundreds of agencies like this and it's difficult to stand out. I would constantly come home to him grumbling about how he either could not rope in an influencer for an event or that he had lost an influencer who was not up for negotiation. Also, brands seldom work with new agencies, so it was really difficult for him to find brands to trust him enough to sign up with him. As a result, the business never earned any income and I would sometimes beg him to go back to finding a proper 9-to-5 job even though it wasn't as exciting. Ron would get pissed and tell me how he needed time and that he was going to make it. However, no matter how many events he attended or the influencers he met, his business was not successful and was definitely not dependable. Meanwhile, I was getting frustrated with being the sole breadwinner and working every second of the day that I was awake. I would come home to work more. The dishes were never cleaned, the laundry would be piling up, and the dog would need to be taken for a walk. On top of this, he would wait for me to cook for him while he would tell me about all the bills that needed to be paid. If I ever brought up anything about my work, he would tell me how he was glad he left his job since he can't be as stressed about work as me. This would really irk me the wrong way because I was the one paying for everything with my stressful job while he was off partying every day at various events. I slowly started to resent him more and more. We would do nothing except watch TV together and it was starting to feel suffocating. On weekends, I sleep a lot because I am constantly burned out from working the entire week. If I ever told him to help me out with chores around the house, he would tell me how starting a business needed his 100% energy, and as his partner, I should be more understanding. Last month, on top of all this stress, I found out that I was pregnant. Now I have always imagined being pregnant and having a baby, but I don't know why, but I felt like this is not how I would like to start a family. I mean, when you are bringing a child into this world, you want them to have a stable home and 2 providing parents. However, in our case, I was the only one providing and he was doing nothing to contribute to the household. If I did bring in a child, then I would just have to do even more work on top of everything I was doing currently. I decided to talk to him about my thoughts. Unlike me, Ben was ecstatic and hugged me in happiness. He told me how wonderful this news was and that he could not wait to become a father. When I brought up how exhausted I felt around the house and how having a baby would only increase my work, he told me that he agreed and that he would start taking up responsibilities around the house. I was surprised by his enthusiasm and I was glad that he was going to step up. In the past weeks, Ron has stepped up. I mean, I still do 80% of the work around the house like cooking, cleaning, and laundry, but he cleans the dishes, takes out the trash, and takes the dog out for a walk. I thought with time we could get better and better over time. This past weekend he told me that he would be going to meet his family, so I informed him that I would tag along since we wanted to make the pregnancy announcement together. I know I did not exactly picture his parents to be thrilled with our pregnancy, but when I announced the pregnancy, their faces literally fell. His mother and sister scoffed at me and gave me the dirtiest looks while his dad looked down as if I had made a grave mistake. His mother looked me straight in the eye and told me how this was just ridiculous and that there was no need to bring a child into our marriage with the problems we were facing. I asked her what she meant, but she ignored me and excused herself from the table. Ron and I decided to leave because clearly the mood was spoiled and I had no idea why. On our way back, I asked him what his mother was talking about, but he shook his head saying he had no idea, and went on to say how it would be a good idea for him to continue meeting his family alone from now on since they were clearly upsetting me. I felt really angry and disappointed with him because I had done absolutely nothing wrong to make his family treat me this way, and with a baby coming I had thought that for once, we could all let go of the past for the sake of the child. Yesterday, while I was at work, I received a call from my Sil. She had never called me before unless it was something really important, so I immediately picked up thinking maybe something happened to my husband or their parents. In our conversation, Sil told me how she had talked with Ben, who felt they were all really disrespectful towards me, but she wanted to tell me finally exactly why they all felt this way. This is when she went on to tell me that she knew how we were struggling because of all the debts I had and they didn't appreciate all the work Ben was putting in for me when I was doing nothing to contribute financially. I took a beat to digest the information and then asked her to tell me exactly what she meant because I was confused by what she was implying. Sil then goes on to say that Ben had told them that I had massive debts and he was the one who had to pay for everything by selling off his car, and he even sacrificed by not buying luxury brands. My head was spinning as she then went on to tell me how she could not let her brother suffer more and that I should not baby trap him. I can't even begin to express how pissed off I felt at that moment. This man-child had gone and lied to his family about me being in debt just to save his own face. He clearly didn't want people to think he was broke, so he had made up this messed up story where he could blame me. Here I was working hard day and night at a job that I disliked just so that I could pay our bills while he could continue to make up stories. I was so angry that I didn't even want to explain anything to his sister, so I simply told her that she was right and that I should not baby trap him since he was not worthy enough to be a father anyway. I then cut the call and informed my boss that I was not feeling well so I could go back home. I knew my husband was out meeting an influencer, so I quickly gathered my things so I could move out with my dog. I didn't even bother leaving a note and just drove away with everything I owned in my car. Since yesterday, I have been living at my parents' place while Ron has been frantically calling me. He must have talked with his sister because he had sent me messages saying how he could explain everything and how he just needed me to come back home. My parents have no idea yet what is going on, but they know this is a serious issue, so they haven't asked me a lot of questions. I am honestly at a fix. On one hand, I am pregnant and I want my child to have a father, but on the other hand, I don't want to be with someone who has been lying about me when I have provided him with so much. Ida for contemplating divorcing my husband after what my Sil revealed to me. Update 1. I talked with my parents about everything and they agree like everyone else on Reddit that I need to leave my husband. What he has done is truly unforgivable. He went on to such lengths to lie about me over the years even though I had been nothing but a good and loyal partner to him. The audacity he had to lie and say it was my debt goes on to show that I can't trust him. I am planning on talking to him and letting him know my decision to divorce him. Update 2. It's been a week since my last update. I talked with my husband 2 days ago. He had been calling and texting me for days. He got in touch with my parents who informed him that I was staying with them, however they did not clarify anything else. He came over to my parents' place yesterday so he was clearly shaken up and straight up started to apologize. I asked him if he even knew what he was apologizing for and he nodded, telling me how after I had left he had called everyone and his sister had informed him that she had a conversation with me, so then he had pieced it together. I asked him why he would make such atrocious lies about me and how insulted I felt when his sister called to tell me that I was baby trapping him. He nodded remorsefully and went on to tell me how he has always felt insecure around his family members. He told me that all his parents cared about was their wealth and status, so he was too embarrassed to tell anyone the truth. He went on to tell me how when his family inquired about where his car was, it was just easier for him to blame me and tell them a story about how I was in debt and he was helping me out rather than owning up to his mistakes. He told me that he never thought it would be a big deal since I wasn't close to his family anyway. I shook my head in disappointment and let him know that I had no idea that he could be this disgusting and manipulative. I reminded him how much I had worked all these years to provide for us, yet here he was admitting shamelessly how easily he had betrayed me. I informed him that I was divorcing him. Hearing this, he started to plead with me to not do this, telling me how we should think about the baby, but I informed him that we didn't have to be married to be co-parent to our child. I pointed out to him that the child would be much happier growing up in a stable environment, free from this tension and discord in our relationship. Despite his pleas, I remained resolute in my decision to end the marriage. Clearly, we had reached a point where staying together was no longer healthy for either of us. The thought of subjecting my child to a tumultuous household filled with arguments and resentment is not something I am willing to entertain. He pleaded a bit more, but in the end, had to leave when he saw that I wasn't going to change my mind. He did try to apologize to my parents before leaving, but they looked at him with disappointment and did not respond to his apology. Update 3. A lot of you have suggested I reach out to his family and clarify everything. I don't want to see them. However, I do think it is right for me to tell them the truth once and for all. Hence, I sat down and wrote a long email to his parents and sister yesterday detailing every expenditure I have ever paid for Ron along with screenshots of payments from my bank account. I wrote about how he was the one with debt and had bills piling up while he kept buying one luxury item after the other. I let them know that I wanted nothing from them and Ben was free to walk away from my child if that is what he wished. However, he would be liable to pay child support every month. I let them know my decision to divorce Ben and told them how they could finally have their wish and marry him off to a much wealthier woman. Since my email, Ben has texted me furiously since he is now being bombarded by his parents and sister who are furious at him for lying about me. They have even called me, but I haven't bothered picking up their calls. His sister has sent me a text apologizing for what she said and is pleading with me to not leave the family. Honestly, I do not care about their apologies or their opinions at this point. I have already made my decision to move forward with the divorce, so I will be meeting a divorce lawyer next week. As for my pregnancy, I am determined to provide a stable and loving environment for my baby, even if it means co-parenting with Ron separately. I have the support of my family, and I am confident that I can handle the challenges ahead as a single parent. Thank you to everyone who has offered advice and support during this difficult time. This will be my last update since I want to concentrate on myself and my baby.